be splitting my time with my colleague from Barrie, Springwater, Oromadonte. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to rise on behalf of my constituents in the Common Sense riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are hurting. They're hurting because of bad policies.
For a second, I want to remind members, if they want to have conversations, to please take them out. The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Common sense Conservatives have a real plan to turn that hurt into hope. It starts with axing the carbon tax that's pushing up the cost of everything. Canadians understand that when a government has an official policy to increase the cost of energy, it increases the cost of everything that requires energy, which is everything. Yet this socialist coalition thinks Canadians are stupid. They think all they need to do is slap a new label on their carbon tax, and Canadians will just forgive them for increasing the cost of living. Unfortunately, they're not the only ones who think Canadians can be fooled. The far-left media allies are already hard at work rebranding the carbon tax. It's no longer a carbon tax. Now they call it a carbon price. How long before the CBC starts to rebrand income taxes as a price on earnings? They can rebrand GST as a price on shopping. They can call it whatever they want, but Canadians know that a tax is a tax is a tax. It doesn't matter how much the carbon liberals, the liberals burn to keep their gas lights burning bright. The truth outshines it all. The truth is their carbon tax is going up in April. And so long as these proud socialists hold on to power, it'll go up year after year after year. It'll keep going up until they've redistributed every last dollar from hardworking Canadians in small towns without transit and giving it to wealthy urban elite, like the finance minister who brags about how easy it is for her to get around without a car. Of course, most Canadians would find it a lot easier with a personal chauffeur, a six-figure salary, and a taxpayer-funded luxury SUV. But what about Canadians like Edmund? Edmund lives on a fixed income. His after-tax income is $20,000. He just received his climate bribe for this fiscal quarter. He also received his natural gas bill for December. The carbon tax on that bill was $72.36. That means he paid $9.41 in HST on the carbon tax. That's just 1 month of winter. 1 month eats up half the quarterly rebate, and that's before Edmund has driven a single kilometre. I'd seek unanimous consent to table his tax statement and gas bills, but I already know these Liberals are too cowardly to face the truth. They would prefer to stay in their nostalgia-infused fever dream where everything is awesome. They desperately want to take Canada back to the 1960s where the CBC was popular, the UN was relevant, and Canadians loved a Prime Minister named Trudeau. They really believe they can control the weather with a tax. Just wave their Liberal wand and say, zap, you're frozen. Only a Liberal could summon the level of arrogance required to believe that if they just tax Canadians hard enough, it'll stop flooding. The carbon tax is about punishing the types of Canadians these Liberals call unacceptable and rewarding the ones who vote for them. It's a tax plan, not an environmental plan. The fact is, it's being generous to even call it a plan. Their agenda is a little more than a string of slogans like 30 by 30 or net zero. Now they've gone on an all-expensive, dirty electric batteries, just as the oil and gas industry is discovering vast reserves of clean hydrogen. That's why they're adopting Soviet-style car sales mandates. The only way their battery subsidies won't bankrupt us is if they force people to buy cars that don't work in the cold weather. And before any of my colleagues jump up and shout about what all those electric cars in Norway are doing, I would remind them that the average temperature in January in Ottawa is 3 times colder than Oslo. Even their net zero promise is a fantasy. The only way to reach net zero is with direct carbon capture, but it takes a lot of energy to remove carbon dioxide molecules when they only make up 0.04% of the atmosphere. Yet these proud socialists oppose cheap electricity. Many of these radical environmentalists even oppose carbon capture. They claim it's a way of keeping using oil and gas. But if all the emissions are captured, why would they still oppose it? Unless this was never about reducing emissions in the most economically sensible way. It's about reducing capitalism and increasing the size and scope of the state. Madam Speaker, this has never been about reducing emissions. Last month, I reached out to the Ministers of Agriculture and the Environment. I asked if they could provide technical experts to come and explain the government's proposed protocol to reduce enteric emissions from beef cattle to farmers in my riding. After watching this train wreck of a government mishandle the communications about reducing nitrogen emissions on farms, I wanted to make sure my constituents knew exactly what the government was proposing. I naively thought this government would jump at the chance to prevent misinformation or promote their protocol. Instead, both offices took a pass on the offer. Considering the massive farm protests in Europe, a competent government would have jumped at the chance to engage with farmers. So it was left to me to explain to farmers what this socialist coalition government was proposing. Reducing enteric emissions is bureaucratic language for reducing cow burps. The proposal is that farmers could undertake measures to reducing methane emitted from belching beef cattle. In return, they'd receive offset credits for every ton of methane they reduce from a set baseline. Several farmers in my riding are pioneers in the field of capturing emissions. I wanted to ensure they'd earn the credits for the innovations they're already undertaking. Farmers like the Clazy brothers, who built Canada's first biodigester to turn manure into electricity that they could sell back into the grid. Farmers like Don Russell, whose patented technology eliminates methane from manure. As a member of parliament for these leading-edge farmers, I wanted to make sure they knew what was coming. While they had many questions, everything always circled back to the bottom line. How much will it cost? How much will they earn? Basic questions everyone operating a business will ask. Unfortunately, the government doesn't have those answers, and not just because they couldn't be bothered to drive up to the Ottawa Valley. The government doesn't have the answer because it doesn't know. They even admit it on their website. Here's what the government says about the price of carbon offset credit. Quote, "The price of offset credits is primarily influenced by supply and demand. If there are many offset credits available with little demand, prices will be low. If there are few offset credits available and a large demand, prices will be higher." End quote. There it is, in digital black and white. The offset credit is the real carbon price, a price that emerges from the intersection of supply and demand. A tax is set by government decree. The carbon tax is not a price on pollution. It's a tax on energy. It's a tax on mobility. It's a tax on life. The government knows what the tax on carbon is, and Canadians know the tax on carbon is going up April 1st. That's why Conservatives are calling on this government to cancel the tax hike. Canadians know we are going to axe the tax, just like Canadians know that we'll build more homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. The longer this tired, flailing NDP Liberal Socialist coalition ignores the will of Canadians, the bigger the reckoning will be. To increase the tax when everyone knows it's not long for this world is to rub salt in the wounds of high inflation. No amount of rebranding, gaslighting, or fear-mongering will work. It's time for them to listen to Canadians struggling with the cost of living, fueled by reckless Liberal spending. It's time for them to stop punishing Canadians for heating their homes. It's time for common sense.
Yes.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House.